Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Friday. It's hard to believe it is September 1st. So, this is, well, for me, the second day of school. I started back yesterday. I work part time at the awesome school known as the Montessori School here in Belfast. Super cool place, really great people. They do amazing work. And just, the other thing about it that is so awesome, at least for me personally, is the amount of flexibility that I have around the job because I just work there part time and I'm able to have this other crazy, lifestyle that I have is, where I'm trying to be a living and working musician. But the thing that's so awesome about the school is that I have like lots of flexibility with, for gigs or getting nights free and being able to have a lot of flexibility. If I give my boss in the school like some notice, um, it's been really really awesome. That's always the thing with musicians. It's like with people who have full time jobs or part time jobs, and if they're not quite at a space of where they can make a living off of music, you're kind of doing both, and you have to work like two or three different kinds of jobs. And it's especially tough for musicians who have to work a full time job because you have to really, it's a lot of hours and you have to like really navigate it. And thankfully, I don't have to do that anymore. I used to have to do that. Have to be in that kind of matrix thing for a long. I was doing that for such a long time. So, but yesterday was my first day back, so very very cool, very excited. Today's Friday, and I did a show, and also the other thing, my schedule is pretty sweet, so I have more time. It was a little bit harder to do it to do the videos for this channel during the summer. Just a little bit more crunch for time. I typically do these videos in the morning. Just I don't know. I feel like it's a good way to kind of start the day. I usually have typically in the mornings. That's usually when I have kind of this brainstorming sequence of events of where that's usually where when I have ideas for things, and it's not just related, say, to for this channel, but when I have ideas for music stuff or maybe trying to set up a gig or something creative, I typically have. I mean, it's probably a thing. It's probably pretty common, but typically it happens in the morning. Usually that's when I have like ideas for something new or and so it goes hand in hand with doing these videos. I typically think around at night about what I can do, what movies I might want to cover. I don't have it planned out like I used to, like when I was doing videos on Facebook. I would have things pretty planned out, sometimes a week in advance, and I would also promote the shows leading up to the actual show, and then I would do it, and I would even like take notes. I would have it really organized that way, and it was something to be said about doing it that way. But I decided, when I moved into this other area of doing YouTube, I kind of wanted to move it into more of a loose, a little bit more off the cuff, but still, trying to keep it focused. But I wanted to keep it a little bit, move it into a little bit more of a kind of a laid back place. Where it's a little bit more off the cuff. And the other thing is, there's so many movies that I love and that I want to talk about. It helps me dive into those things a little bit more. I feel like I'm able to cover more movies. I don't have to sit and weigh things out, or have an actual list. So I could, because there's so many. So it allows me doing it this way. It allows me, or at least it seems to allow me, like the mental space to kind of make these random picks, but movies that I have all been films that I've been wanting to get to and talk about. But yet it's not like daunting in that way of going through a specific list or all those kinds of things. So, but it's been cool. I did a big show yesterday on one of my favorite comic book movies by on one of my favorite. Even I don't consider him like a superhero. He's more of like kind of an anti-hero. But the Punisher, one of my all-time favorite characters in the Marvel universe, and I did a big show on Warzone, the Punisher, which is my favorite adaptation of that amazing character. So I'm always trying to mix things up. You know, there's so many different things. I've talked about too. Like I have gone through a big change as far as my viewing habits or my general habits, where I have definitely gotten to the space of where I have big time comic book movie fatigue. There's still tons that are coming out, and I've just kind of got burnt out on seeing any of them. I haven't seen any of the newer movies that have come out, like Shazam, Guardians of the Galaxy. There's even not Thor Ragnarok, but the last, I can't remember what it's called, but the last Thor movie, which came out last year, I still haven't seen it. Black Adam's another movie that's come out. The new Flash movie, which at one point I was really excited to see. There's been so many I can't even keep track. But I've just gotten into the space of where I am so fatigued and burnt out, and I'll probably eventually see those movies. Especially Guardians of the Galaxy. But I've just reached this point of where I've just kind of got super burnt out. But I still love. For me, it's good movies are good movies, and I still love. Like I did this show yesterday on the Punisher, on Warzone Punisher, and I still love those movies. I mean, that comic book world is, part of my DNA. So, it's part of who I am. So that will always be there. So I'll always love those movies. But for newer ones right now, I'm just like, I feel like I'm all set, and I don't have to go to the theater to see them, even though I do want to, and I know that's probably the best way. Just I'm not very excited about it, and that's been a big shift and a big change for me personally around movies. But I'm sure it's kind of a funk, not a good funk, but I'm sure things always shift and change around. So it's always your tastes and we're creatures of habit. People always have their things that they do every day, or they have their tendencies to naturally do their what they do in their social life. But there's always things that shift and change within that. Sometimes you go through big periods of where you kind of unplug everything and redo everything. But we kind of all do the same kind of thing for the most part, and our habits are kind of all centered on like repetitious kind of rituals that we do. And sometimes we need to change them because maybe they're not great or they're not healthy. And then sometimes they are, it's therapeutic, and it is kind of fulfilling for what it is. So last year I did a show. It's hard to believe, it's so weird saying last year, but last year I did a show. I love to try to mix things up at this channel and do like specialty shows where, aside of the usual kind of reviews of video coverage of specific movies, I like to do spin-off shows and like do like the coverage of franchises. Or I did a big show on like movie scores and soundtracks, and I have done some shows where I've talked about specific directors. And I did a big show last year on Stanley Kubrick, who is my all-time favorite director. He is, to me, not only do I love his films, and I own all of his films, and I have seen all of his films like numerous so many times, and not only do I find myself where every time I watch a film of his, no matter how many times I have seen it before, I always have this feeling of where I'm kind of melting into the film. It's like total immersion whenever I watch any of his films. And to me, at the end of the day, that's, when you go, especially pertaining to, if you go to the theater or you have, good sound system at home, but it's that experience, that primal experience of where I look at going to a movie and having a movie experience as like stepping foot into like a ritualistic or a ritual chamber where you're taken to a different place through sight and sound. And it's really about, at the end of the day, about pure escapism where it's affecting all of your senses. It's affecting your your mind and body all at once. And Kubrick's work has always been for me just the highest kind of apex of that. And and also outside of just being such a huge fan of his films, I look at him as just really such a personal inspiration. I look to him as a hero also. We all have our heroes, and we all have people that we look up to in various fields. And for me, it's film and music and people that we always put on this big pedestal, and it's always this constant source of inspiration. And Kubrick for me has always been one of those people where I put him on this pedestal of like, and when I say this term or say this word, I look at it as more of a metaphorical, kind of thing. But I look to him as being like a god, and so that's how it is for me. Like some of the figures that I have in my life that I look to as like pure inspirations, and I look to them as being like gods. There's figures like Nietzsche, for instance, probably my favorite. The famous German philosopher, of course. He is probably, when it comes to philosophy, and I think pertaining to just lifestyle choices and going through lifestyle changes and just an overall view of things. Nietzsche for me has, when it comes to the world, in the world of philosophy, definitely is my biggest source of inspiration. I, kind of always go back to his work, and I'm, reading his work again. So, other people too that I put on that pedestal, uh, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee for me is a huge source of inspiration. I've talked about that in the past with, my love of, you know, martial arts and the experiences I've had with martial arts in over the years. I have kind of stepped away from martial arts. I haven't done any practicing of those art forms in a very, very long time. But there's a possibility I might, get back into it. So, but so many things of what he was about, where the art can be beyond a limitation, or using things that have practicality to it, something you can use in real life terms, something you can use in real life situations, stripping away the fat. That's one of some of the biggest things that I've always gotten from his work. And as far as like, you know looking at things in a pragmatic way of what really works for you and what doesn't, and also having enormous trying to achieve where you have like an enormous amount of flexibility with adversity. So he's always been a huge inspiration. When it comes to music, Autechre is for me also on that list. Two of my two favorite or my favorite band of all time. Two awesome, amazing artists from England who are, I think, the most pioneering electronic group of the past and of modern times. Just tremendous, so incredibly creative. They have such a wide range of, their palette is just so huge. uh, Sonically, with where they, all the colors that they use in the music, and it's so creative, and they always are always pushing the boundaries. So inspiring, and I was fortunate to meet them and spend quite a bit of time with them, and that was one of the best experiences of my life. So, and Stanley Kubrick is another director. I look to him as being just an incredible source of inspiration. Personally, his my favorite quote of his was shortly before he passed away. And it was right on the eve of his last film, Eyes Wide Shut. He was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award, and during the speech he gave, which is so cool and just so inspiring, he was talking about like the metaphorical sense of Icarus, where that's looked at in our culture and cultures worldwide as like a cautionary tale. Icarus, the Greek figure in Greek mythology, where Icarus flies too close to the sun, and his wings burn, and then he crashes and basically dies. And for years, that has always been looked at as like the metaphor for like a cautionary tale, meaning, you can stretch and push yourself to the limits, but you have to know that you can also that can also be the death of you, or you have to, that ambition can also kill you to a degree at the end. But with Kubrick, he said, well, during his speech, he said, well, the problem with Icarus was that when he flew too close to the sun, he needed to have better wings. And I just thought, that was, for me, that is the most inspiring thing. Meaning that you need to that adversity as a person or an individual, you adjust to the adversity, and you can use it for your advantage, but you have to like look at things from different angles and be able to try to overcome things, and creatively there's always the next level. That's always stuck with me. Another director too that is another huge inspiration is the Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. One of my all-time favorite directors, one of the most prolific directors. Just the amount and the scale, the scope of his work, for me, just is so awe-inspiring. He's always been a huge figure for me. Also, when it comes to film, and personally, just about just where he was coming from and how deep and meaningful a lot of his films were. But he could also just make incredibly kick-ass samurai movies. Another figure too I put up there would be Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. And for me, I've always been a big fan, and I've always had a deep interest in the occult. And for me, he was, in a lot of ways, similar to Bruce Lee. And obviously, he took a big influence from Nietzsche. But his whole thing when it came to magic and the idea of like esoteric studies was trying to find things that you can use, some things that are pragmatic and things that have value and where you can get results, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be something impossible. And it's acquiring a skill set of where you can put it in like real life application, and it can work, and you can use it to, hopefully improve or enhance your life. For me, he, in the world of the occult, probably the biggest visionary, and probably did more to affect positive change in how we like evaluate or look at esoteric studies or magical studies. So he's always been a huge inspiration. And and today's show is going to be about Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. I did a show on my favorite film of all time from Stanley Kubrick is The Shining. I did a big show on that also. I can't remember. I don't think I've done any other shows on Kubrick's films, but eventually I'll be doing them all. There's just so many movies, and but 2001 is a close. It's so hard to pick the best movie that really gets you off, but I, you know, I always go back to The Shining as being the thing that just, you know, still, even when I watch The Shining now, it still scares me. It still scares the shit out of me. And so it's, I think it's probably the greatest, arguably the greatest horror movie ever made, or probably the scariest movie, pound for pound. The Exorcist is right up there. There's quite a few, but the other movie that to me is like just truly a transcending experience is 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have this on Blu-ray. I have multiple copies of this movie. I have multiple copies of it on DVD. I think I probably even have VHS. I bought this amazing movie on Blu-ray a few years ago. And again, like I've said before, but watching it on Blu-ray, it is truly a transcending experience. It's awe-inspiring, and you know one of the one of the things too that's so amazing about Kubrick's work is that you can see his films, which I have numerous times, and you get something. I always find I get something different from it. I notice something different from it. It makes me think differently every time I see it, even though I might have seen it 1,000 times. Because I feel like Kubrick was such a detail-oriented director. There's so many layers. There's so many beautiful things that you can get out of it. And 2001, I think, is probably, when it comes to his body of work, it's probably the most dense body of work. The most dense film as far as different meanings you can get from it. The thing that I love about it is that it is so surreal, it's so strange, and it's so ambiguous. And I love that you can take 10 different people, say for example, and put them in a room and throw 2001 on, and afterward somebody can go around and ask them, so what did you think of the ending, or what did this mean to you, and 10 times out of 10, each person is going to have a completely different experience. And somebody is going to say, well, it's really, this film is about, the quest for the idea of what our purpose is as a species, as human beings. Or somebody will get an experience from it where they'll say, well, it's really about, technology, eventually, something that we create, and it eventually, usurps us and takes over us. So many different things. Or it's a study on how incredibly insignificant we are as a species too, and how the universe can just swallow us up. There's so many different angles and so many different views, so many different opinions, and to me, that's the strength of 2001. It's one of, it's got to be one of the most, or if not the most, like, hypnotic experience that you can have. and I love horror and science fiction are my two favorite styles, like I've said many, many times. And I think arguably it's safe to say that, 2001 is probably the greatest, all around the greatest science fiction movie ever made. And, and again, like I just mentioned, The Shining, probably pound for pound overall the greatest horror movie ever made. And I think 2001 Space Odyssey, I think, is the same thing for science fiction. And every time I see this film, it's to me it blows my mind that this film came out in 1968, and just how the effects, the in-house practical effects that were used. I mean, there's nothing dated about this movie. It looks like it came out in 2023 when you watch it. And of course, this film, directed by Stanley Kubrick, the screenplay was written by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, the famous sci-fi writer whose story this is based on. He was also the co-writer with Kubrick. The special features bonus package on Blu-ray, there's all these amazing interviews with Arthur C. Clarke, and where they really go in depth, and they take this pretty deep dive, and where they talk about the way they conceived and constructed the story, and the various meanings about it and around it. The cinematography for this film was Jeffrey Unsworth and John Alcott. Just breathtaking. Just incredibly breathtaking, unlike anything else. And this was like, again, I have seen this movie so many times I can't even count. And every time I watch it, especially on Blu-ray, it is truly a transcending experience. The cast, and the other thing too is this movie, I always feel like it's such a visual feast. I almost think it plays out like a silent movie to a degree, because there's virtually no dialogue, and there's huge and these long scenes of where there's like no dialogue. It's just but yet you're getting. It's truly an example of less is more. I feel like there'll be these big scenes of where there's virtually no dialogue, but yet you're getting so much exposition, so much information. And to me, that's just an example of the genius of Kubrick, where he can give you so much with using so little. Keir Dullea was the star of this film. Gary Lockwood, William Sylvester, and Daniel Richter. Just again, incredible stuff. Keeler was also in a movie I did way last year, or actually this year. This amazing one of the most iconic, probably the most iconic, and probably the most important movie in the genre, horror exploitation slasher series or genre, Black Christmas. And when I finally saw that movie, I was blown away that he was in that, and I was like, holy shit, it was wild. It was I knew about his other work, but I never knew that he was in horror. That he had ever worked in like the world of exploitation. I was just like, holy mackerel, that was pretty wild. And of course, 2001: Space Odyssey has one of the most incredible film scores and soundtracks ever recorded in film history. All the works that were included were Johann Strauss's Blue Danube Waltz, Richard Strauss's symphonic poem, Zarathustra, Gorgi Ligeti's Atmosphere. It's also one of the most popular, and it's safe to say too that this film, the music was such a powerful component of the movie. It acted as a character, and it was also, this film came out in '68, and I believe it was one of the first, aside from the movie being, looked at as a classic, people really sought out and demanded that there be a soundtrack, like release, like separately on record or on vinyl. And it's been reissued so many times because of the popularity of it. And again, it's one of those things of the music acts as just as a character, where it's, it might be the most powerful component of the experience. And it's, again, from the minute the movie starts, I always get this experience of where it's so ambiguous and strange and surreal. And I remember even when I saw it when I was a kid, it kind of frightened me. There was something about it that was creepy, and it just kind of scared me. But it has so much tension, and again, it weighs into so many, it moves into so many, ideas around what this work is about. And I think it's really, it's totally up to the individual to make up their own mind, because the film and the work is so ambiguous. But I think it's about, for me personally, I've always felt like, and again, I can't quite say what it really is about, but because it does change, but I do feel it's about more or less the origins of man and what man does in the face of technology, and also to a degree the good aspects and the bad aspects of technology. And I also feel that it also raises questions about religious ideas and even around ethics. I also feel that this movie has a little bit of a stance of where, man is essentially alone, and that there isn't any meaning to life inherently, but whatever that is that makes us, that motivates us, or more or less we as people and as a species, we have to kind of create our meaning, because the universe is so vast, and Mother Nature doesn't act as a caregiver. So it's a very interesting thing, and it gives you this awe-inspiring feeling, but yet you feel alone in this cold world. But yet at the same time, there isn't, like I said, I feel like there isn't any inherent meaning to anything. But we all, on our own, create a certain hierarchy of values, and it all comes down to personal choice, and we essentially kind of have to create those meanings and create the reason as to why we are and what motivates us. And I think it does deal with those things, but it's very ambiguous, and that's the thing. That's the glory of this film, is just how magical it is, and it's truly, I think, the most immersive film you can possibly see. So, and again, to see that, and to always be reminded that this film came out in 1968 is, to me, just, mind-blowing. It blows my mind every time I realize when this film came out, and how it so feels like it came out, this month in 2023. So this is Jason Dean. Thanks again for your support. There's been a few new people that have come on board and have subscribed to this channel, and people have been commenting on the videos a lot. So I love that. Keep that coming. Keep the dialogue coming, and we will see you next time. Peace.